Yeah. Anyway, so obviously the big news of the week really is the passing of Mr. Keith Emerson, which is a really kind of bizarre thing because I only at NAMM the other week, a few weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, he was on the Moog booth and doing, because he's had a very, very long association with Moog, of course, and Keith is one. It's easy to use the word legend, but it's very unusual for it to be earned, and I think it would be fair to say that he is definitely one of those legends of the industry. Very kind of well known for the way that he kind of pioneered the whole performance aspect, using live electronics on stage and just basically wigging out, and a whole generation of people, for them he is the kind of iconic keyboard player. So I mean, it's a sad business, but it's, hopefully we'll be able to celebrate him rather than dwell upon his loss, if you see what I mean. I'll start with you, Rich. Actually, Rich, did you? I know. I mean, they did a lot of big arena tours. I mean, very popular in the States in the 70s. I mean, they were the arena band of the 1970s, weren't they? Of that kind of ilk.
Well, the first time of probably, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 10 times that I saw them was Thanksgiving, November of 1971 at Madison Square Garden, touring on the freshly released, or just about to be released, Tarkus album. And nobody had ever seen anything like that. Some people in England had seen the Nice. Some people in Europe had seen the Nice. And they may even have made it over here briefly. But it wasn't as noticed. And this stuff was just unbelievable. And of course, he had a fairly sizable, what looked more or less like a Moog 35 model up there on stage, and it was terrific. It was mind blowing and game changing stuff. I kind of object to the people. I don't much like the Hendrix of the keyboard analogy that's sort of been going around online lately. But he was a brilliant person who was a fantastic composer, a great interpreter, a really good ambassador for certain kinds of music into a pop format, and a brilliant musician, synthesist, and seemingly a nice guy. I spent a little bit of time with him, not nearly as much as the people you're going to hear from after I'm done. And he seemed like a really nice man to me, and I'm just very sad for his family and for Mary, and that he was obviously in a sad place in his own life.
Yeah, well, I think I did see, like I say, I saw him. I took a sneaky picture of him between two posters because I was too embarrassed to go up and say hello because he's just too famous, for me anyway. I guess in terms of the whole kind of that era of music, it passed me by a little bit because I was probably just a bit too young and I didn't really kind of get that. I think my first exposure to music was probably more in the punk, from the punk end of the 1970s. Rather than the prog rock, and I guess that was something that would kind of replace that whole thing. Gaz, I'm just going to come because I know you're a big fan of prog rock. I mean, they have a major position in kind of performance history, really, and musical history. I mean, because a lot of the stuff that they did, while to my ears, isn't necessarily to my taste. You see a lot of the influence elsewhere nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably for the big bands, they're the band who are most locked in time, I think, meaning their music hasn't really been as durable, as some of the other prog stuff. But, there is great tracks in the ELP back catalogue, but I do think you have to tread carefully. But anyway, sorry, that's another point. The thing about those ELP albums and Brain Salad Surgery, I think especially, is the sound, the engineering of the synth sounds just sounds amazing. I mean, the track Toccata off Brain Salad Surgery is the sound of the synthesizers. I think it just, because that was the album that was used to test hi-fis, wasn't it? To demonstrate.
Wow, really?
How good your hi-fi was. Go and listen, in a blaster Toccata or Brain Salad Surgery, really, really loud after hi-fi. I find that really funny. But it is a terrible, sad thing. I mean, for me, I'm more into the nice, and that kind of it was brutal, raw stuff, and I'm a real sucker for Hammond. And I mean, he really could he could really rock the Hammond big time, and
Absolutely.
that, amazing. And it's horrible. I mean, I'm such a fan of like heroic musicianship, and hero musicians. We just don't seem to have them anymore. I love hero. Hooray! Go on.
Yeah.
Spoil them, boost their egos, make them try and do the most ridiculous things, back them up. That's my. Everyone now is so kind of just put your musician in a box, keep it small, keep it packageable, keep it functional. Keith Emerson's like probably the greatest exponent of the opposite of that. Oh. Sad story, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, I mean, one of the reasons, hello, Chris, that we have you is you toured with Emerson for quite some time. And you must have. Well, I've heard some of them. I know you've got a lot of tales and stories. I'm just going to play this one thing first, and you can tell me whether it means anything to you, if that's all right. I found this video. This was... and there are several things about it that strike me. This is one of the ones that I know really well. Obviously, Fanfare for the Common Man. This is, I think this is Ontario, 1977, and this is the promo video they obviously did. But the thing that I notice is it looks absolutely bloody freezing. There's snow on the ground, and they've got the Moog modular in there, and I'm just thinking, there's no way any of that electronics is going to work at all. And I'm guessing they must have actually been doing the gig in the evening, possibly. Anyway, I'll let you watch a little bit of this, just so that we can... I think that's a Yamaha. Is that a GX or a GS? I forget which.
GX1.
GX1. There's the modular. And they're obviously all freezing their nuts off because they've got the leather bomber jackets and stuff on it. So, my question is, Chris, was that something that you were involved in? Because I don't know the period exactly that you were.
No. Oddly, the time span that I spent with Keith was relatively short, but probably something like 18 months. But it was in his fallow period, a period when Emerson, Lake and Palmer folded, and they had a new band, which was Emerson, Yank and Palmer, with a chap called Robert Berry on bass. And my introduction, much the same as you, the prog era ELP kind of passed me by because I'm a bit young for that, and being sort of more punk oriented, didn't really have an appreciation for his skills. So the first time that I met him, I went down to Seven Oaks and we delivered. I'd taken the GX1 that you saw in that clip to his barn studio at his home. And I immediately was struck by just what a lovely chap he was. He was really kind and welcoming, invited us to stay for lunch and said he'd knock something fresh and lovely up, and turned up with beans on toast. He was a genuine, just a fantastic person. But he had a really profound effect on me musically in terms of my appreciation of his skills. I can't say that I was ever particularly a fan, but I recognised instantly that he was a master of his craft. He played Flight of the Bumblebee, but he had a Baldwin grand piano in his studio, and he lay on the piano and played Flight of the Bumblebee backwards.
Wow.
And I'd been completely blasé about ELP. I really didn't know what they did. I didn't care for them particularly. I didn't really care for prog at that time. And I was struck just by his musical ability there, and then it was jaw-dropping to watch. So that was my first experience with him, and then probably 6 months later, the 3 tour, it was Emerson, as I said, Emerson, Carl Palmer and a chap called Robert Berry, and a guitar player called Paul Keller. They were rehearsing out in Campbell, which is near Los Gatos, just near San Francisco. And I was on a tour with another band in Japan, and the tech who was working for Keith was getting into all sorts of difficulties. Keith had transitioned between the old analog stuff, and there was a lot of, and some of it was analog, but more digital couple of digital racks, KX88s, his C3, the Moog 35. I think that's the right model that Rich said, 35. And a Yamaha Grand, the P7. And we toured that for about 6 months around the clubs and theatres of America, taking the grand piano, the Moog,
Oh my God.
the Hammond up back stairs, into clubs, into bowling alleys, into all sorts of stuff. It was, a roadie's nightmare. But the rehearsal period was amazing. I got off a plane from Japan, having sort of crisscrossed the world, was completely jet lagged and taken into the studio. And Carl was there practicing his double bass drum solo, shirt off, sweating. Why play one drum when 1,000 will do? That kind of mishmash. And all the record company execs were there, and I kind of wandered into the room looking more like something out of Curiosity Killed the Cat than a prog era band. And Keith spoke to me and said hi, and then Carl came out to the studio and said to me, looked straight at me, having not met me before, and said, "Did you like that?" And I said, "Not really." And Keith started roaring with laughter, but I felt every other head in the room dip. And I realised I'd obviously said the wrong thing to the wrong person. But it did stand me in good stead eventually. We prepared for the tour and packed everything up and went on tour. But the Moog was really temperamental. It hadn't been serviced for years. And I believe that at one point, well, there was definitely somebody came, but I think it was a chap called Tom Ray from Moog came out and did quite a lot of repair work on it. And it was only used on, you always forget whether it's Redondo or Hoedown, that donkey sound that he uses from the Moog. Wah! Wah! Because it was so temperamental, I sampled it into an emulator so that if the Moog didn't work one night, we had a backup. But yeah, it was an amazing time, and I think both Keith and Carl learned an awful lot on that tour, and by the end of it, they were really quite humble. We were starting off the show with Fanfare for a Common Man, and that was played on the KX88s with TX816, 8 of them, I think, in a rack. But yeah, amazing. Actually, I've got one quite interesting story. On the penultimate show, we were somewhere in Florida in a club, and the club had gaming machines, and it had an audience of about 3,000, but the back line was drawing more amps than the back line, and the gaming machines were drawing more amps than was being fed into the building. So the tour management said to the owner, "You'll have to turn the machines off so that we can run the whole show." So that was fine. So we did sound check, lights going, checking everything was fine. Great, everything worked a treat. We get to 9 o'clock when the doors are open, and the promoter's eyes obviously got the better of him, and he saw all these punters walking in, and on went the gaming machines, the change going into them as we waited for the show. We went on the stage, smoke and everything filling the stage. They played about the first 4 bars of Fanfare for Common Man, dun, 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 and the whole power to the building just blew. And I was sitting behind Keith's racks with a torch up to my face, and he came round to the side and he was shouting at me, "Do something, do something." And I said, I'm laughing because I knew exactly what had happened. There was nothing we could do, and I explained what had happened. So the whole show was then run with a single spotlight on Keith, a single spotlight on Carl, and all the gaming machines off. But it was a nightmare. But yeah, just a genuinely fantastic bloke to work for. He said to me at the end of the tour, he said, He said to me, "You're the happiest bloke I've ever worked with." And I said, "I take that as a real compliment, but I'm not really that happy." And he said, "Why are you laughing then?" I said, "Keith, I'm laughing at you." And he took jokes and, you know, those kind of jibes really well. It was an amazing time and taught me an awful lot about the business and touring, and, you know, when the mighty have fallen. And I didn't really follow their latter return to ELP, but it seemed to be reasonably successful, and obviously there's a great appreciation for their work in the wider music community. So I was really pleased when I saw that they were doing something as ELP again, and getting the appreciation that they deserve, because the tour that I did with him was, by an ELP scale, very small, but I think much more trying for him and Carl as artists. So yeah, great times.
Oh, that's fine. So I'm guessing that whole tour, you know, they were beginning to embrace new technologies, and so using the Kurzweils and stuff. Did it actually end up just being more stuff as well as the old stuff, or replacing any of it? Because, I mean, was that something that he was conscious of? Because I guess the excess of, you know, the however many artists they had before when they were touring as ELP, and what they were dealing with now, must have been quite challenging to sort of transfer to.
No, not really. I think the KXs were used in place of the GX1 to get his kind of signature sounds. So that's what the main part of that was. But we still had the B3 Leslie. We were replacing cones on the Leslie nightly because he ran it so hard and so loud. So we had a pair of those. He had an L100, which he threw around the stage. Actually, there is a good story. He was about 40. I remember it was Carl's 40th birthday just before the tour, and we had a party that opened my eyes anyway. But on the tour, just before the tour, Keith came to me and said, "Chris, I'm not really getting any younger, and I'd like to be able to throw this L100 around like I did in my nice days, because we're going to do some nice numbers, and I can still stab it with the knives and do those things." So he said, "Could you have a think of how that could become easier for me?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do something." So off I went to Winchester Hardware, and I bought a base plate for the L100, and I cut it to shape, and I painted it black, and I recessed casters into it and made up a big loom for the output and power for it, so that he could actually wheel it round the stage and then tip it and do it. So it was easy to maneuver. And we were in Cleveland, Ohio, of all places. This is the tap moment. And Keith was throwing this L100 around, and he banged it onto the casters, and downstage it went, off the front of the stage into the front row of the audience, landed on its back, and just sat about feedback. And I panicked, and I thought, "Oh, I hope it hasn't hit anybody." And he looked at me and went, "Leave it." Eventually it was muted, and we picked it up at the end of the show.
Was that the last time it was used like that?
It was.
I guess if you have a stage with a rake, that could definitely be something very difficult to deal with.
I've got one story I think I can repeat, because it kind of shows also where they were at as human beings at that period. It is amusing, and I don't want to be offensive because I do hold him in high esteem, but I think it's worth telling. We were in a hotel somewhere, and I came down in the morning to get on the bus, and we were going to the gig. And Keith is in the lobby talking to the concierge, who's given him a bag of his laundry. And Keith's completely lost his he's going mad in sort of artist throwing a wobbler mode. And he says, and I sort of walk over and say, "Keith, are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. I've just got my dry cleaning, and it cost me $85. I can't remember the exact amount, but it's like $85. And I said, "You could have walked across to the Woolworth over the road and bought socks for the value of $6, 12 pairs for $6. Why did you put them into the dry cleaning? I didn't know it was dry cleaning. It's just washing as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not paying $85. He opened the bag and he said to the concierge, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to pay half the bill and you can have half the socks. and he turned on his heels and marched out of the hotel, leaving me tittering.
I wonder, did he split them left and right, or was it just purely numerical?
I've no idea what the outcome was, but it did have me in bits at the time.
That does remind me of the touring hotel laundry thing. I probably told this story before. It's not that pertinent, but I had a really nice top that I bought when we first got into record deal world. We went to see a stylist was hired, and we went shopping for the day. Black cab, jumping out. Right, we're going to Kings Road, the garage, all these places. And I bought all these. I've still got some of them, and this one I was particularly fond of. And I checked into this hotel in Sweden. It was really posh, and I thought, oh, brilliant! I need to get this clean because I'll be wearing it non-stop because I really like it. And it came back. It was an Agnes B top, so it was quite designer. It was quite expensive for the time. And it came back, and it was about this big. It was just completely ruined it. It was just like, oh, that's that then. So yeah, beware. He's probably had a lot of experience. I hope they were washed well. It sounds like you had a lot of fun there, though. Really, I mean,
yeah, and I think that's one of the things also about the man, that he was pretty well egoless to the crew and to those around him. He was a really top chap to work for. He rarely got upset about things, and I think he struggled slightly with the transition from synths with knobs on that he understood, and he did understand the modular. When we went into racks with button pushing and assigning program changes via Cyclogics and stuff like that, I think he struggled quite a lot with that and didn't really want to learn the new technology. So he was just Oh, in fact, I've just thought of another story.
Oh, go on, then.
If you got to, it's just one more. On the final gig that I did with him, I've got two things that are quite amusing about the man. Or we put. I made a sign, I put it on the front of the Moog that said, "For sale, owner leaving planet." And so he came on for the first number and he saw it, and he was not a fan. And I put a plastic dog shit on his on his Yamaha P7, and he really didn't mind stuff like that. And when he was playing, but lying on the piano, playing it backwards, I pulled his boots off. I mean, he really was up for a laugh. He liked nothing more than having a bit of, you hear artists who get most offended about, the most minor thing. And I understand that they're in the spotlight and there's a certain pressure that comes with that. But Keith was always up, provided it was good-hearted and it wasn't really affecting what he was doing on stage. He was really, a great bloke to be around. Top lad.
Excellent.
Finally, the last time I saw him was he called me in a panic. We'd finished the tour and I was working for somebody else, and he said, "Chris, I'm being interviewed by Keyboard Japan. Could you come down and make sure everything's working?" I said, "Look, I'm in rehearsals with this other band and I don't know if I've got time." And he was really sort of sounded desperate, so I said, "Okay, look, I'll work a way to take a day off and I'll come down." So I drove down to his house in Sevenoaks, got everything working, and he came in and he said, "Oh, well, they're here now and they're going to do photographs for the first hour. That'd be great. And then we'll come into the studio and I'll do some playing and then we can have a chat." Anyway, so he sat on his big motorcycle, had his photo taken. He went into the studio, took some posy photographs of him. No sooner had the photos finished, he said to the interviewer, "Chris will answer all your questions," and just disappeared. So that pretty well the whole interview was me telling them the answers they wanted to hear. And when it was published, sadly I can't read Japanese, but it was all there. So yeah, that was the kind of bloke he was. Just wonderful bloke.
Excellent. I mean, those kind of ELP touring days must have really. I mean, because from the outside, you get the sense that the desire to solo and the focus, you just imagine there'd be sort of this enormous ego, and it would be an absolute nightmare to work with. The Carl Palmer and what have you would have been, they were constantly clashing. But it sounds like they obviously got on and it was all right. So that's nice to hear, actually. In a way, I suppose it's the more boring answer, but it's better to know that there was all that goodwill and fun was being had by everybody, and it wasn't like a nightmare like it can often be.
Yeah, it wasn't a nightmare. I think that the circumstances played a large part in that. We're doing quite relatively small stages. Carl had an 8-foot round drum riser, and the first thing that he did every day was to come in and see if Keith was upstaging him. So they always had to be level along the line of the stage. So there was a bit of ego went on. And in fact, Carl didn't speak to me for the first 4 weeks that I worked for them because of my not really comment about his drum solo, not really liking what he did. I was only being honest.
Yeah, just saying.
But I think in many ways he respected me for telling the truth, and how that my relationship turned a full 180 in one event. I used to go running from the hotel every morning. Where we were staying in Los Gatos, there was a big reservoir. So every morning I got up and I went for a run. And Carl used to run as well. He was a karate black belt, I think. I think it's karate, but he was certainly a martial arts black belt. So he's a very fit man. But I was only about 25 then, 24, 25 years old. And I'd always exercised and always kept fit. And one day I was running around the reservoir and I saw Carl just in front of me, and I thought, I'm going to have that old fucker.
Beep, he said.
Oh, beg pardon. So as I drew level with him, I looked over at him, morning, and he got a bit of a shock to see who it was. And we ran and I said, do you mind if I run with you? And he said, no, nothing else, no. And we got about quarter of a mile back, quarter of a mile away from the hotel, and he looked at me and he said, last one back to the hotel buys dinner tonight. And I was gone. Poof. And I ran up the stairs and I looked over the balcony, this fantastic little hotel that we stayed in, looked off the balcony as Carl came running into the thing, panting and really breathing hard. And he said, fair enough, we're going out for dinner tonight, and it's my treat. And that was it. The ice had been broken, and then thereafter, yeah, just the same as Keith. Brilliant.
Excellent. Oh, Chris, thank you so much for sharing those stories. That's fantastic. Well, I mean, all jolly good memories to remember the fellow from. So, let's keep it on that way. I guess it's probably time that we should have a word from our sponsor at this point in the proceeding.